आज क्लास पूरी तरीके से इम्बैलेंस हो गया यार, सेक्स रेशियो बिल्कुल ही खत्म हो गया एकदम से। सॉरी, अच्छा जल्दी शुरू कर दिया है। Okay, so there's a long gap. There was a long gap. So we are meeting after 2 days, right? So it seems that there was a long gap because now okay, so far we have discussed basically about two sort of sources, right? So basically we did discuss about archaeological sources first, right? And then we started discussing about the literary sources, right? So far basically we have tried to analyze most of the sources which are present in India, and somehow we just try to see that what are the pros and cons with those sources, and in what way it might be useful for Indian history writing. So these kind of things we have already seen, but at the same time we must remember few more things, that if you have seen the question papers of previous years, right? So you might have noticed one thing, that sometimes they are asking questions on some specific sources, right? And so basically broadly we have covered most of the sources, but at least we need to cover at least those sources from where specific questions are coming, right? So as we have to discuss in this particular regard, so we need to know about some other sources, such as basically I just told you about Puranas, right? That yes, Puranas are supposed to be very important source to know Indian history, and apart from that some basically biographies are there, right? Or Charita, which is normally known as Charita, right? So these are two sources, very important sources that we need to cover, right? So look, basically what I am going to do, Puranas and Charita, right? So look, sources are very important, at least in regard of paper 1, right? So at least in paper 1 we need to remember some of the sources, and we always try to incorporate those sources in our writings, basically in answer writing. So there what we are going to do, I think I have discussed this earlier also, that definitely before beginning any as such particular chapter, first we'll try to discuss about the sources, and then we'll move to the basic content of that particular chapter or that particular phase. Suppose we are discussing about the Mayans, so basically that we will begin the discussion first with the sources. So we'll just try to cover Arthashastra, Indica, right, and definitely Asokan inscriptions, right? So these three are supposed to be very important, and from these three somehow we might be getting questions, and that is why we'll begin the discussions from there. So that would be the common trend for every chapter that we are doing in ancient and medieval. But there are few sources which are not very frequently coming into our diameters, right? And that is why in those kind of sources I'm just going to cover right now, and there we need to cover specifically three sources, basically Puranas, because specifically Purana is not coming into discussion, right, in any as a specific era or chapter, right? And that is why Purana must be covered right now. Same is true for Harshacharita or some other Charitas, but basically out of these Charitas, right, or the biographies, definitely the Harshacharita is the most important one. So the second is definitely Harshacharita, right? So the first is Purana, the second is Harshacharita, right? There were so many Charitas, right? It is not only about Harshacharita, there were so many Charitas, right? But out of these, Harshacharita is definitely the most important one, and that is why we need to cover it. The third is definitely the Rajtaringini. Rajtaringini, right? By Kalhana. So at least these three sources we need to cover right now, because these are not we are going to cover specifically, or these are not we are not going to cover these specific sources with the chapters, and that is why I'm just covering it right now, and then we'll start with this chapter which is known as the Stone Age, right? Look, So far we have discussed, basically, primarily we can say that we have discussed that normally the Indian writings were not having any sort of historical sense. So the focus was basically on this particular thing. But at the same time we must remember that even though there were few sources which could be said, it could be said that they were having certain historical sense. So basically in this discussion we are going to cover those kind of sources. And in fact there was a very common tendency, right? Even though it has been said that the Indian people, in fact we have discussed lots of problem with the Indian writings, right? And I just told you that in most of the Indian writings you might have noticed one thing, that they were more concerned with the supernatural sort of thing, or the metaphysical concerns, right? Most of the time it has been completely absent, or the historical sense was completely absent in their writings. But at the same time there is a very common tendency with the human being or the societies that they had a sort of inborn attraction towards the past, right? So suppose you people are there, so sometimes you people might get attracted towards your past, your grandfather, your great grandfather, right? And you try to know about them. So somehow this is a very common phenomena or feature of the human society, that they always try to know about their past. So somehow the sources that we are going to cover right now, these are such kind of efforts, right? So we can begin our discussion with the Puranas. And in fact I must tell you one thing, at least in the later Vedic tradition, or in the later Vedic period, we find a concept which is called as Sutta. From the later Vedic period we find a concept of Sutta. So who are those Sutta people? So basically it has been said that these people had the task or duty to basically construct the genealogies, right? And somehow they had to get the genealogies in a particular order, and it was supposed to be their prime function. These suttas were sometimes also known as Magadha. So this term could be seen very frequently in some later Vedic traditions, right, or later Vedic writings, but later on this particular class got disappeared, right? Now what is the, definitely there's a question which comes up, why this particular class why this particular class got disappeared? If they had this tradition of noting down these kind of things, and of course when I'm saying these particular tradition was there, or this particular community was there which was trying to recollect such kind of data, one thing that you must remember, that these data were also collected, right, orally, because by that time, as you do know, that did not know how to write, and that's the reason that they have started collecting it orally. And once you talk about anything, right, which is collected orally, that could not be preserved in a good way, and that is where somehow we don't know about any as such preserved material or stuff which were talking about the genealogies during the basically later Vedic period, right? But after that, right, after later Vedic period, or basically after the Mahajanpada period, there's a new new concept which comes up, and that concept is known as royal archives. Royal archives. So what exactly is this royal archives? So basically royal archives, there was a separate department called as archives, right? And it was the task of that department to collect those sort of stuff which I discussed as task for suttas and the Magadhas, right? So somehow that department started coming into or came into existence, and this department started collecting so many facts regarding basically the ruling people, right? Their genealogies, right? So these kind of things have been collected by them. But unfortunately, as you do understand, somehow Indians were never using any as such material for writing which could be long lasting. Mostly they use the perishable materials, and I hope you remember that they used to write basically on the parchment, right? Or they were writing on the skins of the leathers of the animals basically, and these all were perishable materials, right? And that is why these could not survive. But in some of the historical writings we do find the reference of such kind of writing, such as when Wensang is coming to India, and then later on he was followed by Al-Biruni. So both of them has mentioned such departments in the royal court, and they are writing that they had this very good tradition of storing, or they had very good tradition of noting down the events during the during any particular ruler. But as you can understand, these all were written in a perishable materials, that is why could not survive for a longer period, and that's also one of the reasons that somehow we could not access to those kind of stuff, right? There might be many other things, but somehow we do find the references of these kind of things only in only in perishable materials, right? And as there might be possibility ki there was some other such kind of culture which was there during this particular period, but somehow these got completely lost and we don't have any access to these kind of stuff, and that is why these kind of historical stuff or material got completely lost, right? But somehow these are mentioned, like the royal archives and this Sutta and Magadha were mentioned by some foreign travelers, and that is why we do know about the existence of such kind of institution and individuals, and that is why we are discussing about that, right? And as you understood now somehow we don't have access to the writings of any these, right? But somehow their narratives could be seen in the form of Puranas and the biographies, right? Because this is the tradition, because of what people even in Purana some sort of historical sense could be seen, and that is why this could be later on seen or later on revived, and people have started discussing about their writings, right? So let us begin the discussion with Purana, right? So the first heading, Purana. What language has been used for writing Puranas? Sanskrit, right? That's the normal perception, but I think he is saying correct, right? Puranas were basically initially, it was basically in an oral tradition, like like Vedas, Ramayanas and Mahabharata. So somehow we do know about Puranas only after 4th century AD, right? Why? Because then only we find that the Puranas got compiled and we do access to the Puranas, right? So that's the real reason, because of what we talk about Puranas, which were basically compiled in Sanskrit, right? But once serious studies started for Puranas, then some of the Western scholars, in fact the Puranas have been studied very seriously by certain Western scholars, and they proved two things, right? The first, what are basically these Puranas? So the first thing they just told, if Puranas are basically part of that literary tradition in which the Vedas and other Brahminical literatures were compiled. The first thing. So second important thing, and continue to the first point, and what they are saying, what exactly, I'll be dictating everything, just leave that, you just listen first, and then because this is absent in the notes, and that is why I need to dictate it, right? So what they are saying, the first thing, that yes, Puranas were basically part of the same tradition, right? And that is why if you discuss about Puranas only after 4th century AD, so that's a misconception, and Puranas were basically there or present before 4th century AD. The second thing they are saying, that Puranas, what happened with the Puranas basically, that in Vedas, that tradition, I hope you remember, that when people started basically they started the composition of the Vedas. So it's a sort of, it was not a sort of single compilation or composition, it was a process in which in every phase you'll find that people kept on compiling this stuff, composing this stuff, right? So there is a moment when actually there was there was a limit of Vedas, and these compositions actually went beyond the Vedas, and then they are saying that those slokas or the hymns which somehow could not be included in Vedas, these were later on compiled in form of Puranas, right? The third thing they are saying, that initially the Puranas were basically composed in Brahmi language, and later on the Purana that we access, right, that was compiled, or we can say translated into Sanskrit. And that is where this misconception is there, that whatever we do know about Puranas, these we just know through the the compiled literature that we do have, right? So that's a basic description of the Puranas, right? The next thing which is important for the Puranas, that we have already discussed about the Puranas, that even though Puranas do have so many historical informations or the informations of geography of the contemporary period, but at the same time it is most of the time considered as mythical, right? That most of the stories were fake, and basically some other problems were also there, and that is why it is very much necessary to inquire that what kind of historicity was there in Purana. So that is why we'll just try to inquire in further few minutes that what kind of historicity was present in Purana, and that's the importance in our subject, right? Because if any historicity is not there, there is no point of discussing that. If any sort of historicity is there, it means it is important, right? So we'll just try to inquire that what kind of historicity could be seen in Puranas, right? So we'll begin writing. The earliest form of oral tradition, the earliest forms of oral tradition dash gathas, Gathas, gathas. Let me write. Gathas, Itivritas, Akhyans, and Vamsacharitas seems to have been absorbed by the Puranas and Itihas. Write in Hindi only. Itihasa, Itihas. The earliest reference of Purana and Itihas mentioned in Atharva Veda, and then Brahmans, Aranyakas, and Upanishads. Brahmans, Aranyakas and Upanishads. Now there is a fundamental question. There is a fundamental question, comma, that at what degree history was present or represented in Puranas and Itihas. We will just try to inquire the historical sense of Purana, on the basis of parameters of history, parameters of history which were fixed by R.G. Collingwood. Do you remember this fellow, R.G. Collingwood? Or you missed it? You remember it? No? When did I discuss about R.G. Collingwood? When I started dealing with historiography or history writing, right? So basically in the first class I did discuss about what history is, and there prominently I took name of two important fellows, right, called as E.H. Carr and R.G. Collingwood, right? At least whenever you try to learn history, what exactly history is, right? So you can't avoid these two names, because these two have contributed very importantly what history is, or what is the real nature of history, right? So somehow we'll just try to inquire the nature or characteristics of Puranas on the basis of the definition of history given by R.G. Collingwood, right? So basically the idea of history, which is that was the name of the book, right? Okay, you find you are not going to incorporate these kind of things in your writing, but even though if you are writing in your answer okay on the parameters of R.G. Collingwood, that is more than sufficient to define or to show that what kind of understanding you do have for history, right? And that is why I'm just taking this name here, right? So if you are trying to inquire Puranas, just mention the name, right? But here you need to understand what is the definition what has been given by R.G. Collingwood for history, right? So just put a box just to write 4 points, right? So just you write the points and then put the box, right? First, history must have a character of science, must have the character of science in the sense that it should fasten itself on to some problem, and attempt to discover things hitherto hitherto unknown. What exactly we try in science, right? There are so many unknown facts around us, right? So if any phenomena which is happening, any particular thing which is happening around us, we try to inquire it, right? Just suppose yesterday what happened, there was a fire which broke out in this building. Are you aware of that? Right? No. In this building there was a fire broke out, right? And finally we had to cancel all the classes which were there on yesterday because there was a foundation and so many other things. That is not the prime concern, right? Now the question arises here, if you are from a science background, right, or if somehow you know science, right, in that case you must inquire that what was the reason for this broke out of the fire, right? So if you are not from science, what will you say? ऊपर वाले की मर्जी, कुछ नहीं कर सकते हैं. Getting my point or not? Right? So I hope you're getting my point. What makes the science different from rest of the humanities paper, right? And in fact, I can't say, because all the science, all the papers of humanities, even now, I mean, they are just trying to be more and more scientific, because until and unless you are trying to, formalize any particular thing, there is no point of studying that, right? And that is where, as per R.G. Collingwood, right, the first thing happening, that history also should have this nature of science, that they just try to discuss or they just try to explain whatever happened on some scientific basis, right? They are not saying, I mean, he is not saying it should be, the analysis or the examination should be completely on science, right, or like science, but somehow at least the approach should be like the science, right? That's next. It must have, the second one, it must have you just cut the have, right? B. It must be Humanistic, 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 HUMANISSTIC, humanistic. Or it should be about men. About action of human beings in the past.
So it must be humanistic or it should be about man.
Comma, it should be about man. It's man, comma, about actions of human being in the past. Actions of human being in the past. Spelling of actions, 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 actions of human being in the past. I think this point is very clear. Whenever we are trying to create history, it should be always around the society and human being. That's very simple point. Right. Third, as science, it should have an inquiry procedure. It should have an inquiry procedure, PROCEDURE, procedure. I think this point is also very clear, right? Like in science, we have a method through which we try to find out the reality, right? So in the same way, the history also should have a procedure, right? That must be followed. Without doing that, there is no point of writing history, right? And the last one, it must have a purpose. It must have a purpose, and the purpose of history is human self-knowledge. Now close the box, right? So these are the parameters fixed by R.G. Collingwood. We'll just try to apply these things on Purana, and then we'll try to inquire that do they have any sort of historical sense, right? So close the paragraph and start writing. As per the above given definition of history, it seems that Puranas do not meet any of the requirements. The Puranas never attempted to answer questions, of human actions. At the same time, at the same time, in Puranas, no interpretation in bracket you just write down historical causation. Look, these are the terms which I am desperately trying to get in your notebook. These are desperate efforts, right? So I hope you are making the sense. Whenever you are writing the answers, you also need to desperately put those terms in your answers, right? Very good. Historical causation. Historical causation. And it mostly focused on Hindu philosophy, regarding dharma, artha, kama and moksha. Well, one more thing apart from the subject, right? Normally there is a very wrong tradition in English, right? That we always used to put the A at the end, right? Got my point? Dharma, artha, moksha, kama, right? It's a wrong tradition, right? And in fact, nowadays people have started criticizing this approach, right? Like Jan, we always pronunciated Jaina, right? What is this Jaina? It's a name, right? So we must pronunciate Jan. We always pronunciate Asoka, right? Chandragupta Maurya, right? Thankfully, we don't pronunciate Akbar as in Sanskrit, right? So somehow, this is a wrong tradition, and here onwards I'll just pronunciate only Arth, Dharma, Kam and Moksha, and you will make the sense, okay fine, in what way you are supposed to write. Clear? Right, fine. Spelling should be like, definitely there would be A at the end, right? But I'll be pronunciating because I feel very awkward, because if I, pronunciating in the same way in the seminars regarding history, right? So sometimes will be highly criticized because of that. What is this, all nonsense, right? Even in the academics, people used to, use such kind of suffix, right? But later on, they have completely left this, and they have started. In fact, I think 3 years back, when I was attending a seminar, so even I was directly spoken not to use such kind of things, right? So that you just remember. Okay, carry on. Change the paragraph. It clearly shows that the understanding for history or the materialistic part of society which was always discussed by the Western people and the Chinese to some extent was missing in Puranas. But it does not mean that the history was completely absent from the Puranas. Just write the next subheading: the historicity of the Puranas. The historicity of the Puranas. Though not history proper, comma, the Purana might have historical matter. Purana might have historical matter along with much that was mythological. And this is what the Vamsa, 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 or the genealogical part of the Puranas represent. Got the point, right? Represent. FE Pragator had tried to analyze the historicity of Puranas in his books. As per him, after the religious hymns were collected in Vedas, the ancient secular lore that was left, lore, folklore. Got the point? Ancient, what did you write? Can I see it? Secular. Ancient secular lore left over had been collected in Puranas. After writing was introduced into India, in about the 7th century, BCE, Puranas must have been written down. There is a great possibility that Puranas like Matsya, Bayu, Bhagavad and Vishnu Puran originally composed in Prakrit and later translated into Sanskrit. The another important characteristic which was defined by him, another important characteristics of Purana which was defined by him was the futuristic nature of Puranas. Futuristic nature of Puranas. Got this point? Is the point clear to you? Normally, as per this particular Pragiter, right? What is happening basically? Pragiter is saying that Puranas, the basic motive for the composition of Purana was that they just wanted to predict the future, right? Like, I hope you must be knowing about Nostradamus, right? You might have heard about Nostradamus. And in fact, so many predictions, right, have been done by him. And most of the time his predictions were wrong, right? Like on 21st century, I think he has given a date also, 2021 or something, or 2000, some date, the world is going to be completely destroyed or devastated. 2012, exactly, 2012, then the Hollywood made a movie also on that, right? So somehow, I have seen so many people, those who are very, very much worried about that, and now the whole world is going to be destroyed, and they have started doing the pilgrimages and all, right? Ye chalo theek hai, ye kar lete hain, thoda paap to dhul jayega abhi last time. But I think most of the people were sure that it is not going to happen, right? So somehow he has imagined the Puranas in the same fashion, right? But at the same time, why I have given the example of Nostradamus, because whenever you talk about a book, the book which was written by Nostradamus, it was manipulated multiple of times, right? People kept on manipulating that book. Okay, agar 20 में 12 में नहीं हुआ तो 21 में हो जाएगा, 32 में हो जाएगा. In that way, people keep on manipulating the book, right? Same happened with the Purana. Suppose somewhere around 6th century or 5th century BC, somebody has predicted the future, right? And something that didn't happen, right? And if it didn't happen, then the later writers, what they did actually, they manipulated it, right? And that is why they are saying, what Pragiter is saying, because of this particular phenomena, we'll find numbers of manipulations in the Purana, right? That's the reason that Puranas were manipulated multiple times by the later writers. Sorry? In a poetic form. Yes, I just told you, hymns are collected in Puranas also. Right? Next, change the paragraph. While predicting the future, they have given the list of dynasties the list of dynasties which were going to come in future, in Kali age. In Kali age. In Kali age. Kali Yuga. In Kali age. And in this process, they did discuss about Mauryas, sorry, you cut the Mauryas, right? Sisunag, I hope you remember the dynasty before the Mauryans, right? Nandas, Mauryans, the Sung dynasty, the Kanvas, Sung, S-H-U-N-G, Sung, the Sung dynasty, the Kanva dynasty, and the Andhras, the Satavahanas, right? It is known as Andhras in Puranas, right? Did you get the point? What I did discuss here? So basically what they were trying to do, they were just trying to predict the future. And while doing this, they have just discussed, right? I hope you must be knowing about some predictions regarding India also of Nostradamus. That in 2014 there is a ruler going to come in India, right? And he'll change the country completely. Drastic change would be noted, right? So you might have heard about such kind of things, right? Do you think that Nostradamus would have spoken such kind of course not, right? Right. But somehow they were also doing the same thing. Try to get my point, right? They were also trying to do the same things, and in fact it has been said that somewhere around in 4th and 5th century, before the Christian era, somebody was actually predicting all these things, right? And they have discussed about, they have started the story from, I think Sisunag is the first dynasty which has been discussed in the Puranas, right? And then onwards, the Nandas, Mauryans, right? And while doing this, they have discussed about some minute details also, such as like the Pushyamitra Sung is going to kill Brihadrat Maurya, and through this he is going to, just by doing this, he is going to establish this Sunga dynasty, right? So these kind of, there's no point of going into these details. That what is important, just to understand the nature of the year, right? So somehow you'll find they have discussed about all such kind of things. Mostly their focus was political. Right? Most of the time they were not talking about society or any other thing, society, economy, and these kind of things. But as far as the polity is concerned, so sometimes they have simply tried to do this. Now, I just told you about the later manipulations or the extrapolations. So I hope you are getting my point. Definitely that might not have happened, right? But what happened after the incident, after the incident took place, they changed, right? And they have given the right account of the event, right? And through this process, what happened? Ultimately, we do access to the right stuff. And while doing this process, definitely there might be so many fake things which have been mentioned by them, right? Or mythical. I should not say fake. I must say mythical things which might have been mentioned by them. But somehow, just being very cautious, we can segregate the informations which are relevant to history or which are useful to history and which are not useful to history, right? While writing about the future dynasties, they have given so many minute details as well. So many minute details as well. Such as the killing of Brihadrath by Pushyamitra. Apart from this, they have discussed about the foreign invaders such as Indo-Greeks, Sakas, Kusanas, change the paragraph. There can be little doubt that the royal genealogies in the Puranas embody many genuine historical traditions. Of great antiquity. Without the Puranic account, the reconstruction of a reliable history from the period of Mahabharata war, reconstruction of a reliable history from the period of Mahabharata war to the rise of Jainism and Buddhism, in bracket you write down from 10th century BCE to 6th century BCE. Bracket close. Apparently would be impossible task. The informations of Puranas could be incorporated with the Buddhist and Jain literatures to reach to the reality. As per Romila Thapar, Puranas are very good source to understand the formation of state, or sorry, to understand the process of formation of state, if it is incorporated with other sources. Change the paragraph. Other sources. The utility of Puranas are not ending here, as many cultural and informations related to geography, have also been given in Puranas. So it could be finally said that definitely Puranas contain much historical stuff. Clear? Right? So if any question which comes regarding Purana, that would be the right way to deal with the question. And in fact, definitely we don't have much historical information, but it should be presented in that way. Right? Okay, fine. The genealogies, definitely this is the most important information regarding history, but there should be a description of that information and the way it has been discussed by certain historians such as Prageter, right, and definitely Romila Thapar. At least these two historians must be mentioned while writing about the Purana, and somehow which is adding extra advantage in your answer, right? Got the point? Next, I just told you, so this part is over, Purana is over, right? Now let us move to the next one, Harshacharita, right? So I just told you that there was already a tradition of what? Tradition of recording the events, right? And normally just told you, as I told you, that during this later Vedic period, even though the king was not very powerful, the king was not very resourceful, right? Even though if they had this tradition of someone having in the court recording the basically the activities of the king and the events, right? So and that particular tradition continued even in the modern and post-modern period. So somehow there's a very popular tradition that comes up regarding recording such kind of, basically recording the biographies or the life of the popular personalities. It is so unfortunate that it is not beginning with the writing of only the biographies of the king. Basically that tradition started basically with the writing of hagiographies, right? Do you understand the term hagiography? I think regarding monks. Very good, right? So basically there is a tradition which comes up, and in that tradition we have started writing the biographies or the life of the monks and the sages, right? And somehow I hope you must be knowing about Buddha Charit. Do you remember that? Right. So Buddha Charit written by Ashwaghosh, right? So that is the first book in this tradition, and then this tradition was later on followed by some other people also, right? And then the king basically started patronizing such kind of person who was noting down the events or the incidents, popular incidents regarding the ruler, right? So definitely this tradition comes up, and then we do find numbers of such kind of writings, and those writings basically definitely talk about that ruler, right? And that might be a question that what kind of historicity was there in those kind of writing, but definitely we must say that some historicity or some sense of history or some recordings of such kind of narratives must present in those writings, and that is why these are supposed to be very important, right? At the same time, we can discuss about some other writings which could be also counted in this category, such as the Vamsas. Such as, I hope you must be knowing about Deep Vamsa, Mahavamsa. These are some writings which were very popular during the ancient India, right? And these writings also could be kept in this category. And somehow we can say basically we had such kind of ample writings, right? That could be very important to write the history. But as I told you, there might be so many such kind of charitas and vamsas, right? So you can talk about Buddha Charita, you can talk about Harshacharita, you can talk about Ramcharita, you can talk about Musik Vamsa, right? We can talk about so many writings we do have, but somehow definitely we can't analyze all the sources, right? But somehow what I'm going to do, definitely Harshacharita is the most important one, and that is why we are just going to discuss Harshacharita here. And then there are some others such as Musik Vamsa is also important, Ramcharita is also might be important, Bikramank Dev Charit, that's very important book, right? So there are few other writings, so I'll be just writing one paragraph on those kind of things and I'll just pass it to you. Why? Because that might not be very important, and I'm pretty sure that question is not going to come in your examination except this Harshacharita. So Harshacharita we are just going to cover extensively, and rest I'll be just giving you 250 words, right? And if any as such question by mistake comes, you'll be able to at least deal with, right? And nature, there won't be any difference in the nature. Got my point, right? In nature, most of the writing should be seen, right? So when you are critical to those kind of writing, there won't be any change as such, right? You can apply the same formula to all the all such kind of writing, and that is why without any hesitation you can write such kind of answers, right? Okay, Harshacharita. Definitely. Let us finish this. We have done this Puranas. Now we are doing Harshacharita. Then we'll go for Rajtaringini, right? We'll cover this everything, everything today. At least we'll wind up this chapter completely, right? Okay. So before writing, about Harshacharita, let us write a brief introduction that could be applied anywhere, right? You just write. Freed, F-R-E-E-D, freed from Sutta tradition, comma, the Vamsa form developed a vast body of quasi-historical history. Quasi-historical literature. The Buddhist Rajavamsa, R-A-J-A-V-A-M-S-A, Rajavamsa, R-A-J-A, let me write, wait. Rajavamsa, Deepavamsa, Mahavamsa, comma, the Jain Harivamsa, and the Hindu Jain Harivamsa, 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 and the Hindu Raghuvamsa are some of such writings. Some of such writings. Some. The tradition of writing Charitas, that started with Buddha Charita. Again, this is Buddha Charit, not Buddha Charita. Buddha Charit by Ashwaghosh. Buddha Charit by Ashwaghosh. Can I see the sentence, please? Started with Buddha Charitas, Ashwaghosh, by Ashwaghosh. Later on followed in Harshacharita, Vikramank Dev Charita. Let me write. Vikramank Dev Charita, Ramcharita, whose apex could be seen with Kalhana's Rajtaringini. Got the point? Anything that you are writing, introduction should be like that only, right? Now, Harshacharita. The first Indian work which may be regarded as historical is the Harshacharita of Banabhatta, comma, an incomplete biography of Harshavardhana. This book was written on the first quarter of 7th century and it followed the model of romance. Did you get this? Romance. It's a sort of literature. वैसे नहीं लेना है इसको. It's a model of literature. It's a sort of literature. You must be knowing about, actually there are two sort of novels. Happy ending and tragic, right? So basically one is tragic and the another is this romance, right? Where the things are ending in a positive manner, right? And that is why this particular narrative is incomplete, because the end of this ruler is not very good. But yes, the first few years of this ruler was very remarkable, and in fact over a period of time definitely will find at least Bollywood movie on this particular year. Right? No, this is true actually. I'm not making fun. So basically the first year of that ruler, when he's becoming the ruler, and then he had to face lots of challenges, right? And gradually what happens that basically he had to fight because he had to save his brother, he had to save his sister, right? And then Rajashree, right? And then he had certain other opponents, right? And in fact he was doing all these things, right, in a year, right? Once he access to the throne, right? So he's just doing all such kind of thing, and in fact it has been dramatically shown in the book. I don't know what kind of reality was there or not, that when his sister was about to jump into a Chita, right? And he reached there and saved her, saved his sister. So these kind of dramatic sequences are there in this book. So somehow definitely he is one of the heroic figures, at least as per the Harshacharita, right? And that is why it is very unique. But at the same time, I must say that book is ending there only, right? So somehow, basically, the blows were faced by by Harshavardhana later on, and these were not part of the book. And that is why I just told you one sentence. This is an incomplete book. But that is again, that might be our own justification for the book, that this is incomplete, because some of the authors are saying, this book was not incomplete, rather. Banabhatta was willing to write the book till that point only, right? So somehow these are some basic points, right? Continue. That book begins, change the paragraph, that book begins with Banabhatta itself. And tells the story of him. His own Banabhatta's story. One chapter of the book deals with the families but you have written one chapter in bracket, you just write down out of 8. First chapter of the book deals with the family of the author. The second tells us of his introduction with Harshavardhana to Harsha. The third describes Thaneswar, capital of Harsha. The next 5 chapters are dealing with the ups and downs in Harsha's life. And suddenly the book ends with, and suddenly the book ends with once Harsha saves his sister Rajshri. Change the sorry? Rajshri. Rajshri. Change the paragraph. For some historians, this book is incomplete as it ends with the royal glory whether some historians say that Banabhatta wanted to write till here only. Change the paragraph. As the parameter of history, Harshacharita is not a proper history book. It was basically a prose book. It was basically a prose book following the model of romance. Which is full of exaggerations and flattery. This book has been criticized for giving so many unnecessary details, that too very long. For giving many unnecessary details, that too very long. Unnecessary details, that too very long. Sometimes what happens, you didn't get it. Sometimes what is happening, without any particular incident, he is just giving the description of that event, which was basically not required, right? So just I hope you might have studied so many books, novels, right? I hope you might have studied. So somewhere you find extra description of the thing, right? If you'll read Premchand, so if it is about poverty, it has been described beautifully by him, or it is about beauty, right? It is again described by in many pages. He had this potential to describe the beauty in many pages, or the poverty in many pages, right? So do you find that any historical content is there in those 2-3 pages? No, definitely not. Or any relevant content. By relevant, what exactly I mean? That particular description is relevant to the story? No, not exactly, right? Right. Exactly. So somehow you find so many such kind of descriptions were basically unnecessary. this book was also not based, this book was also not based on sources and evidences. Sources and evidences. Apart from this, he has discussed so many religious and mythological themes as well. The style of the book is also very ornamental, and sometimes seems tough to understand, seems tough to be understood. Sorry, what did I say? The writing or the style, what did I say?
The style of the book.
The style of the book seems to be very ornamental, which is sometimes very tough to be understood. Change the paragraph. Yet the Harshacharita, though not intended as a history in the usual sense of the word, based on historical facts, is based on historical facts. And these facts could be very easily separated from the book. The information provided in the book sometimes confirmed by the contemporary inscriptions and other sources. Sometimes confirmed by the contemporary inscriptions and other sources. Again, full stop, again, comma, in casual references of a peripheral nature, Banabhatta provides other historical informations or confirms such information and confirms such information derived from other sources. such as the informations related to Mauryans, Guptas, etc. Sorry? At this point, you did not understand the point. Did you get this point? Okay, fine. Let me explain it, right? So basically, what did I tell you? Normally, what is happening? The first thing I just told you that definitely it is not a history. It was not a history book, but based on historical fact. That's the most important thing. The second thing, what I told you, that it is very easy to separate the historical content from the book, right? So somehow you can make it out. Okay, this is the historical fact, and that could be avoided. So this is the second thing I told you. The third thing, whenever you are talking about history, I have met many times the references of sources, right? So you do understand the importance of sources. So somehow it has been said initially while criticizing the book, it has been said it was not based on sources, but at the same time we find at many places Harshavardhana, that fellow Banabhatta, what he has done, that he just tried to confirm the information from some contemporary inscriptions, right? Got my point? Okay, he's just giving the reference. The same information has been given in the inscription also, so it seems true. And the second thing that I told you, that it is not only writing about Harshavardhana, right? As a peripheral incidents, right? He is describing about so many other popular incidents, right? Such as I told you regarding the Mauryan Empire, right? And in fact, he has given some like such as that fellow Brihadrat was killed by Pushyamitra Sung, that has been written there. So many such informations are confirmed or could be confirmed by Banabhatta's book. Got the point? Carry on. Change the paragraph. Apart from this, the intense realism of Bana's picture of contemporary life, intense realism of Bana's pictures of contemporary life are also reflected in the book. He has discussed about man and woman of all kinds and classes, man and woman of all kinds and classes, comma, the agricultural patterns the food grains, irrigation technologies such as Persian wheel, PER as Persian wheel is pronunciated as Persian wheel, etc. So it could be concluded that numerous historical informations are present in the book. Clear? Right? So I think any question is coming from Harsa. We have lots of words you have, and as you do understand, the maximum word limit of any question is how much? Maximum 500 words. right? And I think these questions are always asked for 10 markers, right? So maximum 200 to 250 words, that's more than sufficient, right?
Technology of Persia was there in the 7th century.
It's known as Persian wheel, it is not the Persian technology, Persian technology. Do you understand what Persian wheel exactly is? Yeah, exactly, right? So later on some advancement were there, basically, after the year, these people are coming basically in Mughals and Sultanate, but somehow this technology was known in Persian wheel, right? Okay. Just have a break of 5 minutes and then we'll finish this, the last one, Rajtaringini. Okay, so the next book we are going to inquire, that is Rajtaringini by Kalhana, right? So basically this is the book I hope you all know, because if you have started studying history, so somehow we do know about the importance of the book. And as this book is supposed to be one of the or we can say the only book in ancient India, ancient and early medieval India, which could be considered as the book of history, right? And this book is basically, which was developed somewhere in 1148 to 49. That was the period, which is considered to be the period when the book was compiled, right? And that book is giving the history of 12th century BCE to 12th century AD, right? What is the meaning of Rajtaringini, right? Basically it's rivers of kings, right? That's the literal meaning of the text, right? That it is nothing but the rivers of king. So basically, or we can say mostly, it has emphasized on the history of Kashmir. That's most important thing, right? And the second important thing, that book is supposed to be very important because of its nature. So somehow, as we do consider that the book, this particular book was somehow, at least was an effort to write the real history, and that is why it must be having certain features, right? So now what kind of features that could be, that could be given here? So whenever you talk about the real history, right, or the actual history, so definitely so far at least we have understood few things, like the book must be emphasizing or considering the sources properly, right? Apart from sources, what are the other things that could be counted? Historical causation, right? The third thing which is very important, very particular about dates, right, or the years, right? What else? Objectivity, right? That's another important feature, that he has just tried to be unbiased. That's another very important thing, right? So what we are going to do, we are just going to try to evaluate Rajtaringini as per the parameters of history, that in what way we can evaluate that particular book as a pure book of history, right? So before I come come to the evaluation of the book, right, let me tell you one thing. Who exactly was that fellow, Kalhana? So Kalhana was basically son of one of the ministers called Harsha, right? So he was basically the son of a minister, right, and he was part of that royal court, and somehow he started writing the book, right? But at the same time, few more things which might be important, that when you don't find any as a Sanskrit book which is closer to history, how come it happened, or how come it was possible for Kalhana to write a book of history, right, which is unbiased, or which was so much objective? So basically it has been analyzed on the basis of a few things, that in fact what was noticed by, or what was faced by that fellow Kalhana, because of these particular things, ultimately he intended to write write a book which is somehow more closer to history. So somehow, as you can understand, that fellow itself was from Kashmir, and as you can understand that fellow is writing the book on 12th century, right? So if he is writing the book on 12th century, by that time that Kashmir region had faced so many things, right? Like this was the region which faced the attacks by so many invaders, such as Sakas are there, Kusanas are there, Indo-Greeks are there. Then the Muslim invaders also started attacking on that region. So that is supposed to be, somehow it has been interpreted in a way, as we can, when we talked about that Greek land, right, the Greek region. So I just told you that what happened, these people always faced, and maybe it is also there's also one of the possibilities that as they failed most of the invasions in that region, and that is why somehow they had the feeling of nationalism. So it's the same kind of idea has been applied even in Rajtaringini, because this is the region which faced faced so many difficulties, so many invasions, and as there was a long history of such kind of things, and because of what, somehow he was capable of incorporating those different ideas into his writing, right? Because he had an interaction with the Greek people, he had an interaction with the Muslim people, and somehow he learned that culture of writing, right? And that is supposed to be very important. The second thing, so far we have discussed that most of the writings were done by the Brahmin people, right? But somehow Kashmir region was basically a region which was predominantly followed by the Buddhism, right? And as it was being, Buddhism was dominant into that region, and that is why there was an independent culture of writing got developed in that region, and somehow it also became one of the reasons. So these were certain reasons because of what, ultimately we find the result as Kalhana's Rajtaringini, and somehow he became capable of writing a book which is supposed to be much closer to the actual history, right? Carry on. Rajtarangini which means river of kings, compiled in mid of the 12th century, is the only Sanskrit narrative which is considered to be closer to history in a real sense. In that book, the history from 12th century BCE to mid of the 12th century AD or CE, from the 12th century BCE to 12th century or mid of the 12th century CE has been written. The ups and downs of the region, in bracket you write down regions, REGIONS, regions. In bracket you write down many foreign invasions and interactions enabled him to write a book like Rajtaringini. The presence of Buddhism might have also contributed for the free independent or for the independent thought of the writer or author, Buddhism was definitely, no, I'm not dictating, right? what I look. I hope you can differentiate the nature between Buddhism and Hinduism, right? So somehow we can always say, sorry for I'm not trying to hurt anybody's sentiments, right? Brahmanism was always a religion which was based on exploitation and some other things, right? And that is why there is no doubt that Brahminical or in Hinduism, Brahmanism was always dominant, right? And in fact, they always tried to exploit the some other communities. Somehow Buddhism was a religion definitely much different from Hinduism. So it has been said that somehow it developed that particular atmosphere in Kashmir region that people could think at least freely, because it was not about Varna system, it was not about caste system, they all were Buddhists. So somehow, as per the authors or historians, somehow this particular reason got the base for the writing of this, right? Okay. Next heading you write down content. Rajtaringini could be considered as a storehouse of informations. Storehouse of information which collected information irrespective of any biases. Got the point, right? Like Brahminical writings, they are not they were not trying to much write about the Brahmins or the Rajputas, right? He has written about the lower caste untouchables everywhere. In fact, he is the earliest writer who has tried to see the relationship between two sexes, right? The male and the female. I mean, this gender relationship was also perceived by him, or also he tried to write. So I hope you can understand what kind of advanced mindset that fellow had, right? Okay. He might be the earliest author. Who tried to study the eternal problems. Of gender relations. First point, political and administrative aspects. Obviously, this book was about kings, and that is why given extensive details of rulers like Lalitaditya, Muktapid, Lalitaditya, Muktapid, and Chandrapid. At the same time, he has discussed, about the administrative machinery, the administrative machinery, bureaucrats, and Brahmins. In some instances, he has discussed about the hunger strike as a political weapon by the Brahmins. Next, economic aspects. Though Kalhan does not stress the economic aspects in his chronicle, his descriptions of famine, food prices, taxation, food prices, PRICS, taxation, currency, give a picture of economic life of the times. Next, social aspect. No.
It is about only the Kashmir.
That too when it was in use. I'll come to that point, in what way his narrative got changes, right? I mean, it is changing over the time, right? I'll just discuss that point. First finish this, social aspects. Kalhana gives a revealing picture of the society as he discussed about slavery, caste system, status of women, etc.
What was the status of women earlier?
Well, it is that we'll discuss while discussing this, early medieval period. तभी हम बात करेंगे status of women के बारे में, ठीक है? From his writing only, we come to know about absence of parda and haram, parda and haram, the ruling princess, and free women, right, etc. Next, evaluation of Rajtaringini. As per R.C. Majumdar, Rajtaringini shows the high water mark. Rajtaringini shows the high watermark of historical knowledge reached by the ancient Indians. Reached by ancient Indians. Here onwards you write in few points. First, Kalhana was very particular about his sources. Definitely he has used the Brahminical literature, but he had a critical approach towards it. He might be the first writer who knew the historical importance of inscriptions and coins. As a legitimate source of history. In bracket you just write down A B Keith, KEITH, A B Keith. जरूरी नहीं है मेंशन करना, अगर करते हैं अच्छा है, ठीक है. A B Keith. Next point. Kalhana did not believe in supernatural causes for any event. Rather, he preferred to examine the real causes Next, he had interpreted the events in a way that if it would not happen, what would be the result? What might be the result? Next, Kalhana also could be praised for using a proper chronology in his writing. Though it was not possible for him in early stage, but after 813 and 14, he got very particular for it. Next, Kalhana tried to his best to be impartial and honest while explaining anything, as on so many times he had criticized the rulers. At the same time, he tried to show positive and negative aspects of any problem. Most of the time, he criticized the officials for their greed, disloyalty, oppression, etc. Disloyalty, oppression. He was even critique to the Brahmins. Kalhana? No, he was also Brahmin. It's not possible. It all depends up to the mentality of the person, right? It is not like that, right? Anyways, last paragraph and finish it. Apart from all those pros, definitely certain cons were also there in his writing. Such as he was not completely untouched. Untouched from few things such as the dominance of religion, didactic nature. Did you get the point of didactic nature? हम पहले भी डिस्कस कर चुके हैं. Where always you are using history to, teach someone something, right? Well, this is true, but you can't be in a way that you are a philosopher, right? And whatever you are trying to, tell, that is correct, and you must, rest of the people or society must follow that. So that is known as didactic in nature, right? So yes, he is also, using such kind of thing, right? Didactic nature. And of course, sometimes the pro-ruler view. Ruler view. But these limitations cannot minimize the importance of his work, That's it, right? I think ample of stuff is there. Any question which is coming regarding Rajtaringini or Kalhana, definitely this question is going to be repeated many times, and that is why I'm just wasting my time and effort, both the things, right? Because definitely this is one of the most, you do understand, at least we have studied that much history where you can understand the importance of Kalhana, right? So yes, you need to be prepared and in fact what content that I have given you, nobody is going to write this much content, because in most of the books you won't find good content on Kalhana, right? And that is why you need to incorporate certain ideas for in this area somehow. But now this is not only the end of Kalhana, at the same time this is the end of the the peripheral things of history, right? I hope you might have gone for the haircuts, at least the boys. ठीक है, haircut के लिए जाते होंगे ना. So mostly what technology he uses to adopt, he used to cut it from the sides, right? And when it is done from the sides, and then he used to cut it from upside. You might have noticed that the same formula I am trying to adopt here. So I have just given the shape now, right? And now we have to just see the eras in the chapters, nothing else, right? So it's very simple. But one thing that you always have to keep in mind, whatever we have learned so far, don't miss it, don't forget it, right? Because every time we are going to imply these ideas, right? What are the features of history? We have analyzed some of the sources, and ultimately these are the things going to pay us, right? And that is why I was just investing that much of time in these kind of things, because somehow now I think you have people have if you are listening carefully, so somehow you got the nature of history, right? Okay, now what are the things that we are going to focus in, right? So these are the understanding which are very much required, right? So that is what we have been doing. I mean, sometimes even it was irritating me also that I am using much time, but now history is most of the time I used to say history is a very simple a paper. Why it seems very simple to me? Suppose now we are going to pick the first topic, that is Stone Age, right? Now in Stone Age, I am very frankly I am telling you, just 4 to 5 topics are there, and that could be done in 2 days only, right? From where the possibility of the questions are there. Now if you are talking about the Stone Age, what are the possibilities? Let me talk about that, right? So definitely their life phase might be one topic, their religious belief or their cultic belief, right? And their contribution towards painting. That's it. Do you think any other topic could be asked? For the, at least for the Paleolithic and Mesolithic, that's done. Once we come to the Neolithic, again it's very simple. The first controversy regarding the Neolithic revolution, that could be asked, right? The second thing, the domestication, right? That might be one. What were the factors which ultimately forced them to go for domestication, right? That's it. Finish. And their religious belief and their so 4 or 5 topics there. So now the things are very simple, because ultimately you have to know that what are the topics might be important. So what pattern we are going to follow? Initially I'll just discuss overall. Okay, this is this particular chapter. Everything we'll discuss in first half an hour or 1 hour, and then we'll pick up the themes and we'll do it, right? So that's the and that is how we are going to complete the syllabus, right? So tomorrow and day after tomorrow there won't be any class, right? And we are going to meet on 16 now, Thursday. ठीक है? Okay, see you.